You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Thanks for making your home at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here, and I'm so glad to be with you. Happy Friday. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome our next guest on the program. It's Dan Celia. He's the president of Financial Issues and Stewardship Ministries. He's a nationally syndicated radio host with over 600 stations that hear his program. Nationwide, he's well respected for his opinions and advice on investing and his knowledge of the American economy. Thank you, Dan, for joining us today.
Stacy, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
Okay, so I'm so excited to talk to you about this because I've heard a lot of what I've seen online and heard on other stations. It sounds to me like a lot of garbage about the economy. And I'm looking at the metrics that we normally judge an economy by, and I think the president has made some really good moves. Has he been perfect? No, but he's a human being like the rest of us, so that expectation is ridiculous. What can you tell us about the U.S. trade deficit? It's bigger than ever before, and people are now starting to complain about it on the left and the right.
Well, the trade deficit, the difference between our exports, imports, it's always been bad. It's the same today as it's been for the last 15 years. It doesn't move much. We will always, as most nations, not most nations, but so many developed nations have deficits in their trade. I mean, that's typically the way it is, and you almost need that for a healthy economy. I think it's far more important that when we look at deficits, we consider how we, at least in America, are we being taken advantage of, in the sense, are we gaining anything from the imports that we receive? Are we gaining anything from the exports that we send out to those partner countries? And I think what's happened recently is President Trump's come along, and his economic team says, "Hey, look, we don't really need to examine this. We've examined it for a lot of years. It isn't fair. It's a very lopsided situation, and it needs to get fixed, and it desperately needs to get fixed." Now, I don't know that they thought that back then Steve Moore and Larry Kudlow, Larry Kudlow, obviously a big part of his team now, wasn't then, was an advisor when we first talked about this. And, I know those guys. I've talked to them. I've had them on my program. And, I don't think they thought that this new president just coming into office was going to be willing to do what so many other presidents wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, and that's to confront communist China and say, "Hey, look, we got a problem here. You're getting all the advantage. We are getting very little advantage. As a matter of fact, we're not getting any advantages on the other side of it." So, I think that the trade deficit is going to look very, very different a year from now. I think that we will likely we're never going to be, net exporters. I mean, we're not an export nation. So we're always going to be bringing in more goods and services than we send out. It's just the way our economy is built upon a service, consumer spending economy, very different than most other big nations that we deal with. So I'm not that concerned about the deficit in trade. I'm more concerned about free trade, that we can get back to free trade and, really get the economy moving, because we have so much industry that does depend upon free trade.
So I love the way you're able to break that down and weave all of it together. The real perspective here is, are we growing? And does the GDP have growth? And I think on both of those, the answer is a resounding yes. And you mentioned trade with China. And so, Dan, I often get a little miffed about the China thing, because they've used their cheap labor market and their ability to, let's say, Steve Jobs, or it's now Tim Cook. Tim Cook needs, let's say he needs 100,000 screws for the teeny tiny screws that, you put laptops together with. So MacBook Pro production. And so in China, he can say to a manufacturer, I need 100,000 screws. I need them in 72 hours. And they can mobilize 100,000 people who work in the screw factory to work 24-hour shifts, 8 on, 12 on, whatever they decide. And they've got that kind of manpower, and they can turn over items with lightning speed and efficiency. We don't have that kind of manpower here in the United States. We're not a, factory economy. But then the flip side of that is, with all of that instant gratification that you can get in China, you also have them stealing the intellectual property and flooding the Chinese and Asian markets with knockoffs, and that cuts into the profitability of a company like Apple or anyone else who does manufacturing there. The president seems to be the first one in my adult lifetime who understands that and wants to do something about it. Why are people fighting him on that?
Because they don't want to see him succeed in doing it. I don't have to tell you this, Stacy, but for the benefit of our listeners, we've got to understand that everything this president does is always going to be framed with this unbelievable hatred for the man. Mainstream media, the left, it's not that they disagree with their policies. They despise this man with every fiber of their being. So it is a whole different world for when we look at how mainstream media is evaluating some of these things that you were just talking about. It's evaluated with this overwhelming ideology of hatred towards this president. So we're never at the main street that is listening to mainstream is never going to get a real picture, unless they're listening to Stacy on the Right or Financial Issues. They're never really going to get a true picture of what is going on in America, and it's really sad. And so it's really difficult to have a debate about any of these issues when the foundation of the debate coming from mainstream media or from the left is built upon hatred, not upon fact, not upon reality, not upon necessity that we might need in our economy or other things, not about any of that stuff. It's built first upon hatred, and then everything else stems out from that. And it's a huge, huge issue for anybody to try to understand what the reality of things are. So, we're always, but yet there, as much as they may dislike this man, we have never had a president in my lifetime. I'll say Ronald Reagan, but since Ronald,
right.
I don't think we've ever had a president that loves America like this man. I mean,
it's true. You can hear it in his voice when he's talking about the issues. Today at the Rose Garden when he was addressing the nation about the emergency, it was the same thing. And you know what, Dan? So you're talking about the hatred for him. He said something today in that address when he was talking about, the national emergency, it's official, we're doing that, we're going to get the wall built. But he said if he was able to do, I don't remember exactly the thing he said he would get, but he said if he made a deal with China for $1 to get something amazing from them, Democrats and his opponents would still say, well, he didn't get enough, or that's not really a success. In other words, he can't ever win on anything.
No.
And I think that's something that's important for us to kind of we have to process that so we can think properly about what we're seeing him do. I see people on the right screaming with anger about him declaring a national emergency, but they're not taking into consideration the options that are currently left open to him after seeing really the entire United States work against him during the last shutdown, working together to shut down the airports, shut down business, make federal employees, who are some of the richest people in America, look like poverty-stricken, ne'er-do-wells. They work together to bring the country to a screeching halt. So the shutdown is no longer an option for him. And the national emergency is really what's left. on the table for him to use.
Well, you're hitting the nail on the head. I mean, it's so frustrating, to me as well, as we see everybody, even those on the right, screaming about this. I wonder why they weren't screaming when President Obama admitted that one of his executive orders was, flawed constitutionally. It wasn't constitutionally legal. But he did it anyway. Nobody said a word. Even the people on the right. We've got a whole body of people on the right that have never played offense in their life. That everything is just sit back and play defense. And now they would have the nerve to scream, look, it's not a perfect deal. It's not a good deal. My thing was, when everybody on the right was screaming about this deal, and it is a bad deal, no doubt about it. But nobody is, after all that he's done, all that he has talked about and has followed through with, they have no faith in him. I just gotta believe that this wall is going to get built the way he wants to get it built. Wall, barrier, whatever you want to call it. It's going to happen. And he knows in his heart of hearts it's going to happen. And ultimately, that's, as far as I knew, I thought that was the end game. I thought that's what we were trying to achieve. But nobody is trusting him because he is not doing it through the parliamentary procedures or the way that it has politically been done so many other times. And they don't, but he hasn't done anything that way. So why would they expect that this time it's going to be the time? He's going to get it done. He's going to get it done. And, I said on Monday, he's got to sign the bill. Let's keep the government open. And then in the next breath, say, we're declaring a state of emergency. We're going to appropriate money from, these areas, and we're going to build this wall. And that's exactly what he did. It's exactly what he did. And look, he knew all along that he was going to have to do that to keep the government open. I think the only miscalculation that he made is he didn't realize that this bill was going to have as many poison pills in it that it really does.
Yeah.
And and that's going to be a hurdle. And I think it's going to be a legal issue to see if when he starts moving money around that is legal for him to do, then does that supersede that money kind of separated from the deal, or is it part of the deal? I don't know the answer to that, but that could be still a problem and an issue that he's going to have to face. But I think in the long run, he's going to get it done.
Well, so I agree with you. And I think, Dan, one of the things that we have to do, because I've been reading all of the stuff about the bill that's been horrible, and it is really bad. Like, it's the worst bill. But there's a silver lining to it, which I don't think you know how it is when you get some bad news, you just start, your brain just starts racing, and you can't really do analysis when you're in the moment of getting something like we realize how bad this bill is. But Dan, isn't it just the truth that if he's able to do the wall and fencing, the kind that he wants to do, which is the concrete and steel slat, that the 1.3 that they've allocated that can only go in a certain area, that means everywhere else he'll use the money that he's moving around. And I just, when you say he's going to get it done, some of the things that we're worried about, like the bed space and different things about deporting people who get here and they bring an unaccompanied minor in and all that, there'll be moot issues if the wall is there and the people can't get in. So there is a little bit of a method to the madness, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely is. Absolutely is. And I find it hard to believe that so many on the right can't see that. They can't understand by now the way this president operates. And there is very much a method to it. And that's why I'm very confident that ultimately, as you said, what matters is the wall gets built and all of those other issues become irrelevant. If we have more boots on the ground, if we are able to enforce better, if we direct, now we're directing because of a barrier to the ports of entry, and we are now have people to properly handle all of that, and judges and so on and so forth. I think you're right. I think you're right. It all becomes, a moot point. And ultimately, the American people win.
Well, I think something else, Dan, that I just don't think we can really fathom how much we don't know. So how much the president doesn't share with us when he's in the Rose Garden sharing, how much of what we don't know has impacted the decision that he made and the forces that are moving behind the scenes. And that includes forces on the right that don't really want to see a wall built. And so he's dealing with it in the way that is the best plan that he can set out. But what we can do is we can kind of trust, because obviously as Christians, we know that God turns the head of the leader to the left or the right or whichever way he wants it to go. If we believe that, then we know he's going to make mistakes, obviously, but he's also going to be really, it's what God has for us that we have to be praying, Lord, please give us more justice on our southern border. Give us peace in our land. Give us revival. Give us the things that we need to bring our nation back to you so that we can have less of not just the fighting and the political stuff, but the breach at the southern border is a symptom of a nation that is turning away from God. And I really feel like we got to keep praying. We got to keep being wise. You guys got to keep listening to Dan Celia. I hear the music. I hate that. Dan, thank you for coming on the show today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Stacy, thanks for having me. I hope we do it again soon.
Yes, let's talk again soon. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Great weekend. God bless.
Great to talk to you. God bless. I was such a great interview, you guys. I like Dan. He's a great guy. Okay, we're going to be back with more. We'll talk to you, 866-963-2037. You're the interview of the third segment, so call in. We'll be right back.